Our next slide here, I'm going to set you up on a conversation that you have to catch, okay? And you're going to go, what? And I remember when I first spoke this message, and I had this one woman, I love her, Janice, you would really like if you met her. Janice was looking at me like, why are you talking about this stuff that's on the screen over here? And I'm like, you have to catch the point out there. Because I'm trying to give you a perspective before we talk about why the debt goes away, okay? Now, when we look at fairness, because people talk about fairness all the time, and you think about the debt release, that's just not fair. And by the way, the Bible says, he reigns on the rich and reigns on the poor, Ecclesiastes. Job, Ecclesiastes talks about bad things happen to good people, just simply what the deal is. And what is fair? It's what I want. It's my truth. No, forgive me, I'm just telling you an analogy. This is not how I feel. But let's just say Scott said this. Let's say I claimed this kind of point. Now, would you say that I might have studied when I have these other two books over here, Nasara, Mark of the Beast, and Revelations of the Red Pill? So, let me pull this off here. I have two books that I've written on Nasara, and I have video series that explains this kind of stuff. And we're doing a video right now about Nasara. And if you were to really study who's talking about Nasara, I'm not just talking about it on just a basic level. I mean, they kind of blithely talk about it or give you a little thing with all the 10 or 12 things that are inside of Nasara. But people who are really spending time upon Nasara, what you're going to find is there are going to be very few people that are studying as much as Nasara as I am. And I'm just telling you the fact, okay? And if I said, because I've written these kind of books, I should get more than anyone else, you go, well, maybe that's fair. I mean, why shouldn't I get something way more than you people for this kind of thing? And yet, I'm trying to tell you, it isn't about fairness. It is not about fairness. I want to read you this verse here because it's a powerful biblical verse. Romans. Now, if you want to read a book that will mess your brain up correctly when you do this right, it's Romans 3. We're going to talk in 3, verse 21. Now, apart from the law, the God's righteousness has been revealed, attested by the law and the prophets. That is God's righteousness through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe, since there is no distinction. And then he follows up with a verse that I used to memorize. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. What in the world is verse 22 going to? So let me kind of keep this on the screen when you think of this. Righteousness is a point of justification. See, most people believe when they think of righteousness, and I just talked to a pastor about this thing, and righteousness is something that we think of in the English word is to be right, okay? Or they would also say the process of being right, okay, or getting right. And that's what the Catholics' kind of viewpoint comes from, and many of the other denominational points, including very many Christians, feel that exact way. And they go, I'm just not right. And so if this is the portion of right, I'm sitting down here, we're all sitting in different phases, trying to move our way up the food chain all the way to get up to the right. And when I do bad, I move down on the food chain, okay? So it's always moving up and moving down depending upon what's going on in the world, okay? Or excuse me, what's going on in my life. But righteousness means justification, or to be just, which means that you either are just or you are not just. Now, how do we explain that? Let me just kind of put it in this kind of way. I don't have anything in front of me here, but let's just say I had a lanyard in front of me. And let's say I'm going into a theme park, okay? And when I was growing up, there's this theme park in Denver that was very common. It was called Elitch's, okay? So just think about this theme park, but let's just say it's a really detailed theme park. So there are different sections of what people could go to. And let's say at Elitch's, if I get a basic pass, I can get into like 60% of the rides, let's just say, okay? But if I get the upgraded pass, I can get into like maybe about 15% more of the rides, so 75%. But if I get a season pass and I pay all the upgraded fees, I can get 100% of the pass. So let's just say the 60% is a little green dot on the bottom. The 75% pass is a little yellow on the bottom. And the top end one is a big old nasty red line saying, you get to go in everywhere. There's nothing that is accessible or non-accessible for you. Here's the point. When you are just, there is nothing that is inaccessible to you in Jesus. You are absolutely, completely righteous, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And you do this, what that verse is trying to tell you is that you do this by faith. And faith is the evidence of things hoped for. So what happens here, how do we have evidence? Well, guess what? Didn't we just talk about, this is evidence. This is why I believe in Nasara. Nasara's got so many biblical principles that they can't help doing it. When there are salespeople and there are business people of all types that come up with a really great process, then you go, holy cow, if your company will just do this, it works. And you start digging into the principles, which I've spent a lot of time digging into different philosophical points that happen in business. And you go, this really works. It's because it already has a biblical principle they're just employing. Sometimes they're Christians and sometimes they're not. But it doesn't matter. If it's a truth, a real truth, not Scott fairness truth kind of things, it's a truth that stands in time, then it always works. And that's what faith is. The faith is the evidence of things hoped for. So we have faith in the righteousness that we already are just in that. It's not because of what you do. And then there's this actual fascinating word called distinction. And in distinction, it basically, it's this way. Now, I'm a musician. If I listen to a guitar out of tune, I'm going to rip it out of his hands because it could make me crazy. Where everyone else can, if you can't really hear very well and you just have a monotone kind of ability, you wouldn't hear the difference. It has nothing to do with your hearing. If you have a basic, ability for good distinction, it's called timbre. In that timbre point that you might have, just basic timbre, you might notice that there's something wrong, but you can't really tell what it is. But a musician would listen to that and go, oh my God, you're so out of tune. And it could be just a quarter pitch out of tune in that way. But it's a big deal to musicians and it makes them crazy. That's why I don't listen to music a lot, because I'm really picky about what I listen to. People always want me to listen to something like, oh, but you'll love it if you listen to this. And most of the time, stop, I can't stand it. I'm sorry, I'm picky about that. Now, when the Bible was talking about this word distinction, what he was actually saying is that when you have two different instruments, that only a musician could hear the difference between the two. Now, how powerful this thing is that it was explaining something called timbre. But let me also tell you about something else. There's this thing called difference lineaments. That in the 1960s, we finally understood this terminology in psychoacoustics. Now, I'm an audiologist. That's my background to this thing. And difference lineaments was only understood that we could understand the difference between two different pitches. And it does loudness versus pitches. And by the way, this whole psychoacoustical understanding is explained in the word distinction. So don't tell me, sorry, I'm going to get a little pushy here, but don't tell me the Bible's been rewritten, because that word should not be in there when it's related to this. It is a perfect understanding, a musical, detailed level, differential understanding of what the word says. So I put it to you this way. Is fairness inside of God? And the answer is absolutely not. God has a justice, a just point that happens out there. We're talking about the systems that are happening in the world. There's a justice coming. Now, Frank Turek is one of my favorite apologetics that you can listen to. And he was really talking about, in this video, I could show you, but basically in the video, go look him up. It's called Cross-Examination. And when you go listen to him, he's got such a great way about him. So he'll video a kid and ask a question. The guy asks a question and goes, I'm having a lot of troubles with this righteousness thing. So like, how there's grace a part of it, and he's trying to explain it. And basically what Frank goes off of the kid, who's really making some good information there. He says, listen, okay, you go to court, and there's a $5,000 fine, and if you don't pay that $5,000 fine, you're going to jail, but you don't have $5,000. And the kid was saying, yeah, well, it would be like the judge giving you the money. He goes, it's actually even beyond that. It's the judge, or excuse me, he's thinking like your father giving you money, but really the reality is the judge walks down through the faith issue and distinction. That means Jesus walked down, he pulls out the $5,000, and that's the only way that you get out of the system. So he makes a judgment call based upon the righteousness, this distinction that comes out of here, the distinction of righteousness. And he goes, hey, listen, you can't pay for this, so that's why I'm going to give you the money to get you out of this. When you understand that righteousness talks about money, did you know that? Faith and sin, the word harmatia in the Greek, it means missing the mark. And we use that in a Middle English context. It's like missing the mark when you have shooting an arrow at a particular target. And if you were not exactly on the target, you sinned or missed the mark. Missing the mark also has a debt component, that you're always in the debt structure. That's why I use this kind of thing. This is your mark up here that you want to hit, and you feel like you're always underneath. Because when we see this debt release, you're going to see how gorgeous it is.